Some of you heard me say this on Sunday morning a couple of weeks ago when Shauna and Ben were doing their teaching series, that we kind of wanted a little less of Ben and more of Shauna. And that's what we're getting this morning. I'm happy about that. Let me ask our friends to come up. I'm going to ask Justin and Rachel Wade and John and Wendy Lay to come up, and I'll ask my bride to come back up as well. And what we thought we'd do is just, part of it is just to give Shauna a break so she can just rest her voice for a second before she comes back up and teaches a little bit more. But it's to give you some sense from families who are thriving here in San Francisco, kind of what they do and why they do it, and for us to all learn from each other. And certainly we could have had other examples come up here. So I appreciate these folks. Let me just quickly introduce them. Justin and Rachel Wade, they have two little ones, so they're kind of representing our little guy segment, right? Caleb's a year and a half, and Maya is 4. They live in the Bayview neighborhood, and they've been in San Francisco about 5 years. And then we have John and Wendy Lay. They have two little bit bigger guys, but not quite as big as what ours are. So Christopher is 7 and Daniel's 5. They live in the South Twin Peaks neighborhood, and they've been here a little over 5.5 years. And we're Tuolunanaki-Diggy. We have 3 of the older ones, right, 16, 14, and 12. And we've been in San Francisco for coming up on 8 years, and we live in the outer Richmond Seacliff area. So what we thought we'd do is just give you some sense of kind of how these families are living in San Francisco and how they are thriving. And so maybe we'll just talk a little bit about, why San Francisco, right? All of us have options. If you heard, kind of, we're from other places. Many of you might be from other places as well. Rare is the native family that's been here forever and ever, that has 8 generations back of grandparents who live in San Francisco. We're all from somewhere else. And the other assumption that I'm making is that we all have options. I mean, if you get to know these folks, you'll realize, like, they're kind of rock stars at what they do and who they are. So maybe go to the Lays first. Like, these guys are superstars, right? Like, why you could go anywhere. You could, professionally and personally. You could go back to where you're from. Why do you choose to stay here in San Francisco and raise your boys here?
So we moved to San Francisco about 5.5 years ago for exciting job opportunities. So for John, that was in tech. And for me, it was in the public education system as a teacher. And so one of the things that we didn't expect when coming out here was really that God, through Epic, was really revealing a larger purpose for our lives beyond the work context. And so we've been coming to Epic since pretty much since we moved here from from Boston. And I think with each successive sermon series, we found ourselves really undergoing a shift. So, and really like thinking about God has a larger purpose for our lives. I distinctly remember the sermon series around neighbors and meeting your neighbors, and that was a nudge for us to really get to know the neighbors in our Mission Bay apartment complex. And then after that, it was learning about our spiritual gifts, our gifts, and how we could put those into play to advance His kingdom. And that was also really eye-opening for us. And then I think thinking about serving in the seminar series around really like serving, getting into your neighborhoods, outside of work, being a servant and leading through serving. And so this most recent sermon series around loving where you live, it was a marvel, like as I was reading Shauna's book and thinking about, wow, like could it be the case that we're really living out this ethos in San Francisco, and how much of a shift that had been from when we just arrived here. And I think it's totally exciting and energizing every single day to wake up and ponder this question of how are we living sent? How are we loving where we live? Putting all of our gifts in play to really advance the kingdom of God into His glory. And I think that has been incredibly energizing and invigorating every day to be like, wow, He can use all of us uniquely in this way.
How about for the Wades? Thanks, Wendy. Was there a single moment that clicked for you guys that, like, this is where we're supposed to raise our kids, or has it just been something that's been growing over time? I'd love to hear a little bit from you on that.
You or me? You first.
I would definitely say that, just like you guys, we came here for a job. But when we got here, within the first week of living here, from our past experience, we're like, serve. We don't know the city, we don't know anybody, but what we do know is we do know that serving is a great way to learn about a city. And so there was a church here that we were looking at the time, and they were doing a serve the city thing, and we just jumped in and we started serving. And so, yes, we came here for a job, but over time, I think that it has evolved into, we know we want to be planted here. We know that serving is a big part of that. We know that being connected to a local church where we felt like we could use our gifts and use our uniqueness to further the kingdom was important to us. But as we had kids, because we moved here, we did not have kids, so it was just the two of us. It's evolved. It's evolved into, now that we're planted here, and now that we're serving our community and serving not only this Epic community, but the city at large, we want our kids to be a part of that. We want our kids to know that we are planted here, that as far as we know, unless God moves us, we will be here. And it's growing those roots. It's digging in deep. And so it's definitely evolved over time. But having that base of serving and being connected to the body is what drives why we're here.
Let's pick up on that, because I'd love to hear. You said you moved here before you had kids, serving, that makes sense. Young couple, that's cool. Now you got little guys, little ones. How do you keep that ethos moving? How do you stay focused on serving? Because I think the quote, Shauna, that you said about how can we tell our kids that we're all about God when all they see us is focusing our lives around them? I paraphrase that, but I thought that was really powerful. How do you guys do that?
Well, I think when we moved here, and I love how you phrased the question, because around how do you have joy and you get that click.
Right.
And for us, our joy is in the Lord. So we believe that, he orders our steps. We believe that he's got a plan for us, and that plan's for good. And when we moved from Cincinnati here, we felt like we weren't leaving something. We were moving towards something as opposed to running away. Because we had a great life in Cincinnati, and we were very well entrenched in our church, and we were serving, and we were living sent in the Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky area. So when we came here, it was about picking up where we left off in a new place. Right, so it wasn't trying to create something we weren't. And when we got here, we knew no one. We don't have any family here, didn't have any friends here. And so we just started one step at a time. And so you start that as a married couple, there's no children involved. But when the kids got here, it just became doing the same thing with them, because we didn't know another way to be, right? There was no, now we have kids, I guess we'll stop serving. Or now we have kids, I guess we have to leave the area. We wanted to do what God wanted us to do. And we felt like as long as we had peace being here, that we really wanted to lean in. I heard use your gifts. We wanted to lean in from where we were gifted and just say, how can we be helpful? And we wanted the kids to get caught up in that, because literally we don't really know another way to be.
And it's just a part of what we do. Like, if it's a part of your family, it's not like, now we're going to go. It's like Maya and Caleb know that on Tuesdays, we come to Epic because mom teaches mom's group. And that's what we do as a family, and that's important to us. And mom's using her gifts to teach. But through example, that's how we transfer this to our kids, right? It's through example of, this is how we live our life. This is a part of the Wade family.
Yeah. How about for you guys, John? Like, how does it all work in terms of living that out, bringing the work piece in, right, and kind of connecting that with your boys?
Yeah, I think one thing for me when I think about serving is that there's kind of very, you're doing a community service project, and you're very explicit ways of serving, but there's also just kind of serving in where you're at. So even for me at work, having a serving attitude towards the people I work with, how can I help the people around me grow? Actually caring deeply about them as people, not just necessarily for what they contribute to the bottom line, and sort of establishing those relationships. So it's kind of in all aspects of your life, in all realms, you can be serving and having this impact on people. It doesn't have to be so in specific carved out areas. It's really should be ubiquitous in whatever you're doing.
Yeah, Shauna mentioned integration as a term, and the example she gave of her upbringing that I think a lot of us could relate to with our own parents, and how that previous generation kind of talked about and dealt with life. And certainly from a father's perspective, I can relate in terms of thinking about my dad, who was very present, but it was a separate, there's a work thing, and then there's a school thing, and then there's a community thing or whatever. What I'm hearing from you guys is it's all intertwined, right? There isn't a separation. It's this is what we do. So I think that's a really critical piece. Maybe I'll turn to my bride to talk a little bit about some of what we do, which you may not know. We homeschool. So for us, kind of home and school is a connected piece. It's all kind of, life is forced to be connected together. So maybe she can share a little bit.
Well, I mean, one of the things that we do is people ask me that sometimes when they find out we homeschool, and they say, well, do you have specific hours that your kids are doing school stuff? And it's like, well, at this point in our journey, it is all integrated. It's just we choose to live this life, and but we in order to really thrive in what we do have to choose what we are accomplishing and to make those connections, to really define value and weight to what we're doing. We need to choose what we're doing very carefully and be very intentional about that. So in the school environment or the play, kind of what we do is we like to find places in the neighborhood, for instance, that we're going to do extracurriculars. So let me give you an example of my kids found, they were playing instruments when we first came here, flute and piano at the time, and we found a community music center that was right in the Richmond district, and we found instructors there. We had a great time doing it. They came to a point where they weren't practicing any longer, so I decided to back off on the instruments. But the connection piece that Shauna talked about was so critical because it was through that admin who saw what we were doing, had all of the kids there. We were doing, we were reading while one child was in the lesson. We were doing things where we were reading aloud, or I was helping them with something. That she saw that we were enjoying life that way, and so as a result, later on, a year plus went by, and then she called me up saying, you know what? One of our instructors really is wanting to start up a band and serve the homeschool community. I was like, what? And so I had not even thought about that. That was like God knocking on our door saying, let's do something about this. And it was that connection piece. It was about, choosing intentionally to be in our neighborhood and not choose to go crossing the city, but instead to choose and then really finding value in that. And then we've ended up starting up a homeschool band. And now we're playing, and it's evolved and grown, and there's a couple of kids here at Epic that are part of that. So it's just really neat to see that it's those connection pieces, just kind of living out your life and showing that you're an ambassador for Christ, you're an ambassador for who you are in your neighborhoods, in your home, and for us that involves school as well.
So let's kind of think a little bit about this. And Shauna had mentioned prioritization and choices, right? And the way I think about it is there's lots of good opportunities for our kids. How do we determine which ones are the right ones? Because there's a couple things by way of assumption I'm going to make. I know about these families. I think probably everyone in this room. If you're living in this city and you're raising your kids here, you're kind of a high achievement oriented individual. Like I call this kind of an all-star city, right? You have to bring your A game. And if you can't bring your A game, then you're probably not going to make it here. Like that's just how it is. It's too hard. It's too expensive. It's too difficult, right? We could retreat to other places. And we all want the best for our kids. We want to take advantage of the opportunities that are available here. How do you make sure you don't run yourself ragged? How do you make sure you don't sign up for every single thing that's out there, right? Tips? How do you do it? How do you guys maintain balance? How do you make sure, maybe I'll start with the weights. How do you make sure that you do have time to serve? That you can prioritize coming here on Tuesday for mom's group, that you can prioritize playing in the worship band when it's time for you to do that, or other leading the Moms Thrive events. And so how do you do that?
You want it? Okay, well, I'll start with this one. This is ever evolving. So I don't want to sit up here and pretend like we have this knocked and that planning margin in our lives is down to a science, because even probably not the best quote for church, but Mike Tyson has a quote that says, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. Right. So, you can have this great plan of what you think you're going to do, and then life is going to come at you, and you're going to need to evolve. But the thing that's really worked for us, can't believe I brought the Mike Tyson quote out, but that's living an integrated life, I suppose. we used to look at just the week to plan our activities, and now we look at the month. And we filter the month, and even for our vacations and time away, we look at the whole year. And we're really looking at is what do we want to accomplish, and we're filtering that through who we want to be and what are our goals. I recently created a life plan. It's part of a book called Living Forward that is out of the small group that I'm a part of right now with Ken and Kelly McCord. And it's a really cool thing because it talks about drift, right? And if you don't know where you're going, it's really easy to drift because there's all these really good opportunities. You can get pulled into anything. And knowing what we stand for and knowing what we don't stand for and knowing what we really want our kids to experience has been a guiding light for us to say no to a lot of things, to say yes to a few things. And I think the other piece is there's only so much energy to go around, and margin actually gets planned. Like downtime where there's nothing going on or we're just gonna be gets planned into our calendar, and nothing can trump that. Because if we don't do it, then it'll just get eaten up because life is so busy and there's so many needs that are there.
So very ever evolving, like we struggle with this, but also to know what our giftings are and to know like where God has pulled us in this season. So I'll use a very, an example that I think could hit home for a lot of us here, but the church and the churches that we go to, we can all probably do a lot of different things to serve, right? A lot of us are capable to do, maybe it could be administrative work or it could be ushering, but you can't do it all. And so you have to look at the things of, God, where have you called me? And so a perfect example, and Will's sitting right here on the front row, but I assisted Will for a little bit. And I loved assisting Will. I loved being a part of children's ministry. But there's a point to where I was also teaching mom's group, and I still have family and kids and their activities. And it was like, well, I got to quit. You know, and it was hard, but, you know, because I love Will and I love our church and I love our ministry here, but it's not where I feel like God has gifted me in this season. And with the small amount of time is you have to say no to certain things that are good things. And so leading by example, or we hope that we are to our children, in that same way with the activities, it's Maya, you're really great at singing and dancing and art, but guess what? You know, in this season of life, you can only choose one. You know, because this is where we're at in life. You also have a brother now, and he has activities, and we can't be selfish with our time, and mom is teaching at the church, and dad's working really hard at his job. And so that's teaching them right from the beginning, not only by example, but it's not just all about you. And that in different seasons of life, you've got to make a decision. And going with where God's gifted you in that season is important, and asking God, I can't do all the things, so help me to make that smaller. Help me to figure out where I'm supposed to be in this season.
How about for you guys for Lays?
Yeah, I don't know if we have much to add to that because it certainly is an ongoing struggle for us too. I think that these words of advice that a friend gave us prior to having kids, I thought was really good, just like building in Slack time, and really making sure that you like block that into your calendar as like Slack time, or like nothing can actually happen during this time other than just like our family resting, and then really holding it sacred. So I would say that's been helpful.
Yeah, I would say one of the things that we do is every Sunday afternoon we talk about our hots and melts of the week and really finding out from the kids what their pressure points are. And if there's pressure points that, we work to find the silver lining, that's really important, but at the same time, if those pressure points are happening because of schedule, we need to change something about our schedule. And so we do. And we look to make those adjustments and tweaks. And they can speak in at the ages my kids are now, they speak into that quite a bit. And they have a voice and a vote in that. So, yeah, paying attention.
Yeah, we do. We operate as a democracy in our family, except mom has 2 votes. So kind of, yeah. Let's do this. I want to make sure we have time. We're going to bring Shauna back up here because she's got some really final cool things to share. So let me just do a quick lightning round. Maybe Rachel will start with you, and we'll just go down the line. As you came in today, you may have noticed a board in the lobby, and if you didn't, we'd love for you to pay attention on the way out and so forth. It's just sharing tips about how you make your family thrive, how your family's thriving here in San Francisco. So we all have little tips and tricks, and we're going to collect those and circulate those with the people assembled here. But maybe if each one of us just like one little quick tidbit that you might pass on to the group.
Sure, mine would be just look up and smile. I think that's lacking so much in our communities. And if you just go in walking on the sidewalks or in the bus or wherever you are, just look up and smile at people. It's amazing what conversations could come from that. You may have made their day just by your smile. And so that right there is just showing the love of Christ. You don't even have to say anything. So just look up and smile.
It's a good one. I think get to know the neighborhood that you're in, doing the things that you love to do, and be intentional about it. We've lived in Mission Bay, we've lived in Emeryville for a few years, and we lived in Bayview. And we've always tried to dig into whatever's in the neighborhood that we love to do, doing it there, as opposed to going back to that favorite place in some other neighborhood. And we have about a 70% win rate, but the 30% makes for great stories that you could tell, so it's going to be fun either way. Oh, wait, you.
Quick tip for me, I think just kind of showing gratitude. I think for me, like at work, there's like you interact with so many people, there's so many things that people bring to the table, and just showing gratitude for that, and that's sometimes the starting point for a deeper relationship.
My tip would be always pack extra snacks. So I've found that, in our minivan, I like to just pack lots of snacks for the kids, so they can thrive, not be hangry. And then, our kids have actually used that. We might pull up and there's a homeless person hungry, and then they can roll down the window, hand them food, and have an exchange with them. And so pack food in your car, extra food.
I would just say be a master good finder. Find good in every situation. Count it all joy. Every San Francisco experience, just keep finding those silver linings when things are going awry. Finding the good in it.
That's great. And then I'll leave you with my final tip, which is travel as a tribe, right? So yes, sometimes we do have to divide and conquer because activities and schedules and priorities take us to be divided. But as much as possible, if you can travel as a family unit in this city, right? So Shauna talked about how Ben and Elijah are not here. But if you notice and observe the Pilgrim family, you will see this played out. If you notice and observe the Maraza family, you will see this played out, right? You will see them traveling as a tribe. You'll see them together doing things and sometimes that's mundane, like the Safeway visit, and sometimes it's going to a coffee shop, and sometimes it's taking a hike. But the more you do that, it does two things. The first thing is it builds your family unit as a cohesive unit with each other and builds those memories, right, that the kids will rely on. But the second thing it does, it sends an incredibly powerful message to all around you of like, that is a family that's together, and that's different in today's environment. Families together thriving is automatically setting us apart, not because we're great, but because Christ is great. And that opens up the opportunity for people to say, what the world are you doing? How do you guys do it? Which gives us the privilege to say, it's not us, it's him.
Yeah, amen.
Join me in thanking these couples and families.